Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, your King Clifford Jefferson. I is Godfrey, the 5.Crown of adduce on the folk ruler of Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, the one you call Jesus Christ. We call him King Edgar the Peaceful, for he is the King of Peace. I'm here again to give you another excellent lesson. This one is Crown Gold Part 5. And I'm going into a little bit of history of our ancestry as descendants. You know, we are seeds of our ancestors. And a lot of the information that we are given in regards to our descendancy here in North America were primarily made up of what we call those who are native to this land, now called Native America. Native American. We know that the term Native America was a term that was used under the British Empire called British America. But before British America got established there, we know that control over the territories were controlled by either the Dutch, Spanish, or the French. It's very important for you to watch the previous lectures I did on Crown Monopoly, Crown Gold to bring you up to speed to where we're going to go today. And pretty much, as I said a second ago, is to prove that the ancestry here in North America and what we call the indigenous people are descendants from the Plantagenet Crown. All right, going back to the concept of what we call time immemorial. As you can see, I'm repping my shirt, you know, so everyone needs to get that. You got to apply your colors, you know. So without further ado, in the absence of Archbishop Belmont, I give this lecture is on the strength of me and my queen. She's out working today, but you know, this is my job, so I'm gonna do it the best way I can. So without further ado, let's get started. I hope you all can hear me clear. Once again, for all those who's going to be viewing this lesson, I advise you to take this information to your leaders, your teachers, your guides, your scholars, all those who claim to have an idea of what's going on in this present day. If you watch the previous lectures that I did, once again, they are highly detailed, concrete, well informative. I haven't heard anything other than thank you or well done on the remarks for those who did left remarks. So I thank you for that. Your contributions is very well needed. Whatever it is you can contribute as a gift, you know, it's very important for you to give honor where honor is due, you know, because everyone is supposed to be honorable. So I'm going to show you who were honorable and who were not honorable in regards to our ancestry, because it's been a fight between those who want to be loyal and those who are going to be disloyal to their ancestors. And this is what it has come down to. You know, our ancestors are past or gone, you know, but their spirit's still here. And they left megalithic structures to remind us of that. Going all the way back to time immemorial, even before that, we call it Stonehenge. We call them earthworks, mounds. These are all testamentaries, the representations of our ancestors we call saints, who have transformed and transcended to the etheric world. We know that these burial mounds had a great significance on the insight to what these grave sites represented. And so we're going to visit that. I'm not going to be all what the documentary or how some try to be. I'm just give it to you in plain English, because that's the best way to give it to you where you can understand it. So without further ado, let's get started. 100%. I think there's a God for the good. 1 second. I think I made something. Bear with me, everyone. All right, so this is, I'm going to revisit some of the content that was shown in part 4, just to refresh our memory on some of the things that we discussed. And that will be what we call the concept of what we call time immemorial. All right, time immemorial. Let me get me out the way. Very important. There's a saying, time never was when we were not. The time become when we, let me get it right. Time never was when man was not. The life of time come when man began, the time where he would be no more. So we always existed. Man has always existed, you know, in some type of form. We call it an etheric state, our etheric selves, our astral selves. You know, we're just walking vessels. So a lot of things that we, as human beings, relative to our ancestry, are out of time, out of mind. You know, so we are therefore left with an abstract understanding of the concept of time immemorial, going back to the days of our ancient forefathers, whoever you claim they may be. So time immemorial is a phrase meaning time extended beyond the reach of our memories or our records or our traditions, but they are indefinitely ancient. So that means before we started writing things down, before we started recording things, before we started making traditions, time has always existed. And it said the phrase is usually a legally significant context as well as in common parlance, regular conversation. So that's the abstract understanding of the word time immemorial, and majority that's what we find ourselves with in regards to making the claim, going back to some type of estate, going back to time immemorial. This is where law comes in, and the definition or concrete understanding of time immemorial from a legal perspective or a law perspective, as I said in the last podcast, is in law, time immemorial denotes to a period of time beyond which legal memory cannot go, and time out of mind. Most frequently, the phrase time immemorial appears as legal term of art in judicial discussions of common law development in the United States and the property rights of Native Americans. So that's a very, very important sentence right there. The concept of time immemorial, meaning the time before memory, record, tradition, or ancient, was developed in the judicial discussion, i.e. shared daichi. This is the decision that the judges make in regards to cases that come before them. And then the review of those cases are deposited in what we call case records, all right? And this is what they call legal term of art. This is how they determine law. And in the majority of the time, immemorial denotes what we call prescription of what we call property. And prescription of property is supposed to belong to the true owner of it, or the owner who left it for the beneficiary. They're the true owners. And this argument is being referenced to property rights of Native Americans. And we know when you're dealing with property rights falls in many categories. We got personal property, we got real property, and then you got tangible property, and you got that which is not tangible, such as air. You know, air is not tangible, but it's a property right. You got land rights, you got subsurface rights, you got riparian rights, and I forgot the other one dealing with waterways. All right, so these are all types of rights that are under control of the administrative government. All right, which controls your property rights under the power of what we call eminent domain, under the acclamation of what they call sovereign. All right, sovereignty. So it says the origin of time immemorial, the concept of time immemorial, where you're dealing with from an abstract or where you're dealing with from a concrete, its origin takes place in English, now known as American common law. Because it says time immemorial is frequently used to describe the time required for a custom to mature into what we call a common law. Medieval historian Richard Barber describes this as a watershed between a primary oral culture and a world where writing was paramount. Common law is a body of law identified by judge in judicial proceedings rather than created by a legislator. Originally, the legislature made the law. That's what the administrative government is for. But the judicial branch here in America was created under the Constitution of 1789. Prior to that, under Articles of Confederation, there was no judiciary or executive branch. It was just the legislative branch, which made the laws, all right? And it was under the king and parliament. Judges determine the common law by pinpointing legal principles, consistently reiterating its previous legal case over a long period of time. This is called sterdices. The foundation, once again, I'll say, the foundation of the common law, reference to these territories here, is rooted in what we call England and France. As I said, France and Spain had sovereign authority here in what we call the territory of America before the British crown did. All right. And we know that the Spanish and French houses were all what we call formed into one house and under the jurisdiction what we call the House of Tudors, and this resulted from marriage. All right. But the origin of the English common law under the jurisdiction of England and France came through by way of what we call Henry II. It says the English law, time immemorial ends and legal memory begins at 1189, the end of the reign of King Henry II, who is associated with the invention of the English common law. Once again, I repeat, English law dealing with time immemorial concerning property rights is a legal memory beginning in 1189 and the end of the reign of King Henry II, who is associated with the invention of the English common law. So Henry II, King of England and France, is the son of what we call Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, where my surname descend down from. I said this many times. Just wet my big. So if Henry II was the inventor of the English common law, let's go to the house of Henry II, which is the Plantagenet house. Oh, I mentioned water rights. Water rights, here we go. They probably won't give me the term though. All right, usage in the United States federal and Indian law. Very, very important, because that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so everybody who's watching this video, I don't think you're ever going to hear it explained to you so simple, all right? Because this is the argument today in regards to rights over the land, all right? Rights over the land. Water rights. Time immemorial is sometimes used to describe the priority date of water right holders. In the Western United States, water rights are administered under the doctrine of prior appropriation. Under prior appropriation, water rights are acquired by making a beneficial use of water. Water rights that are acquired earlier are senior and have priority over latter junior water rights during water shortages due to drought or over appropriation. Generally, the priority dates of water rights held by Native American tribes are also called winter rights. It's the date the tribe reservations was established. So they're making reference to what we call Indians, not Native Americans. Indians are classified as Native American, but there's a difference between Native Americans because prior to the Indians being here, you have what they call the mound-builders. Everybody is fluent with that term. The mound-builders, they're not the same as the Indians, all right? We're going to have historians qualify this, all right? Because the historians are the ones who did the research according to the common law based off uses and customs time out of mind, going back to time immemorial. These are discovered by your historians, all right, such as what's the name? Henry Rose Schoolcraft. We talked about them in lecture 4. We're going to talk about him again today, all right? Water rights, aboriginal titles. When claiming or finding aboriginal titles, the land rights of Native Americans possess over the lands they have continuously and exclusively occupied for a long time prior to the intrusion of other occupants. Plaintiff tribes in court sometimes describe their occupancy as dated back to time immemorial. Okay, so they use the term time immemorial, but don't go back to the origin or where the invention of time immemorial came from. All right, because you're dealing with the time dealing with the 16th, 17th, 18th century. All right, they're trying to use the term time immemorial, but don't go back to the origin where the term time immemorial comes from, or traditions. Historically, American judges lack confidence in the use of Native Americans' oral traditions evidence. Oral history shared between past and present generations in court. Let me read that again. Historically, American judges lack confidence in the use of Native American oral traditional evidence. Oral history shared between past and present generations in court. Since the Pueblo de Zia decision of the United States Court of Federal Claims in 1964, oral traditions evidence have received increased judicial endorsement in affirming the use of Native Americans' oral traditional evidence to establish titles to land. This title to land is fee and simple. It's not allodial. It's fee and simple. We're going to prove it. All right. So you understand the concept of time immemorial in regards to property rights. And the property rights is making reference to territory here in what we call North America, i.e. America, reference to what we call Native Americans. Native Americans. And you got a lot of people over here in these territories calling themselves Native Americans. When you say American and Indian, it's not synonymous. All right, it's not synonymous because America was under the British Crown, as I said previously, and the British Crown governed these lands. The British Crown was made up of a unification of England, Ireland, and Scotland, going back to the Treaty of Union of 1707, as well as going far back to what we call the English Civil War, which was called the War of the Three Kingdoms, England, Ireland, and Scotland under Charles I. All right, we'll talk about that in a second. All right, where do I want to go? I want to go here. So the argument is dealing with Native Americans' property rights as confirmed by concrete forum, such as a courtroom. All right, where the judges make decisions based off arguments or claims or proceedings involving property rights, i.e. land. All right, land. All right, and land is acquired by 3 ways: either by incorporating and getting it, by a licensed charter, or by the government, or by a letter patent from the monarch. Those are the only 3 ways that you can acquire land. And the latter 2 is unlawful because the king owns the land under the allodial title as a result of it belonging to the crown. And that land is called crown land, and crown land is entail. Let me just prove it to you. This needs to be explained to you. Give me 1 second. Like that. This needs to be explained to you by your leaders, by your guiders, by your teachers. When you listen to them talk, they're not producing the record. When they're explaining things, they're just talking. No, I'm showing you as we go along. How many people can do that and be honest about it? All right, crown land. Crown land sometimes spelled. 1 second, let me make sure y'all see this. Yes, you can see it. Crown land sometimes spelled crown land, also known as royal domain, is a territorial area belonging to the monarch who personifies the crown. Personify means to incarnate. All right? Personify means to incarnate, to bring to an existence, bring into an existence. It is equivalent of an entail estate and passes with the monarchy being inseparable from it. I repeat, crown land, as also known as a royal domain, is a territorial area belonging to the monarch who personifies the crown. It is equivalent to an entail estate and passes with the monarchy being inseparable from it. Everybody see that? All right. What is the crown? What is the entail estate? In English common law, fee-tail or entail is a form of trust established by a deed or settlement that restricts the sale of an inheritance of an estate and real property and prevents that property from being sold, divided by will, or otherwise alienated by the tenants in possession. And the state calls it to pass automatically by operation of law. This is called statute of descent and dispensation. The land has to transfer by way of a statute already in place by a created legislator, not to be decided by some judge. It should be decided based off the law that's already in place by what they call operation of law, which is called the statute of descent and dispensation. All right, everybody needs to understand that. The one who's explaining it like this. The term fee-tail is from medieval Latin, which means to cut short. Fee-tail deeds are in contrast to fee simple. Understand that? Fee-tail, entail is not the same as fee simple. Everyone who holds a mortgage deed or everyone who has a lease holds it in what we call fee and simple, fee and returnable, or life estates. You just have the use, that's a prescription, and the easement. These are real estate terms that everyone needs to understand. Fee-tail deeds are in contrast to fee simple deeds, possessors of which have an unrestricted title to the property and are empowered to bequeath or dispose of it as they wish, although it may be subject to the allodial title of the monarch. It's black and blue, it's right there. Or a government body with the power of eminent domain, such as the United States or your states. They use eminent domain power, and it's still subject to the allodial title of the monarch. It's right here. All those who don't believe it, it's right there. It's right there. So if you want an understanding, it's not about being proud or boastful. It's not about feeling ashamed. It's about bringing yourself home, bringing yourself back to the tree of life, the family tree from which you sprung from. All right, this is going to be discussed today in regards to your state. Because if a tree branch fell off a tree, who has right to the branch that fell off the tree? Is the person who picked that tree up, that branch up, or the tree? It's the tree. But the tree can't bury the branch underneath the ground. They bury it on top of the ground. All right? Now, that thought process, hold on to that, because I'm going to show you that in our ancestors' traditions, based off how we used to bury our ancestors. All right, the practice still goes on today in the territory governed by the French. They don't bury their ancestors underneath the ground, they bury them on top of the ground. Their mortuaries, their tombs, their mounds are on top of the ground, not underneath the ground. All right, pay very close attention. All right, so let's go to it. One more thing I want to show you, the crown. If you watched yesterday's lecture, it says the concept of a crown is a corporation so developed first in England as a separation of the physical crown and the property of the kingdom from the person and personal property of the monarch. It spread through English and later the British colonization, and is now rooted in the legal lexicon of all 15 Commonwealth realms. There are various dependencies in states and free association with them. Okay, what is a corporation? So, a corporation soul is a legal entity consisting of a single soul, incorporated office occupied by a single soul, i.e., a natural person. All right, a natural person, not a legal entity. A legal entity is a legal person or corporate fiction, which is composed of majority of all that you see today. Corporations, they're citizens as well. All citizens of the state and citizens of the United States under the Compromise of 1790, under the Residency Act of 1790, as well as the what was it? The Compromise of 1790, the Residency Act of 1790, and there's another one. The Funding Act of 1790, if I'm not mistaken. All those took place in 1790, where the debt that the United States owed for those who financed the United States was now put on the citizens. That's why the United States pledged their property under the Articles of Confederation. They pledged itself they pledged all their property as collateral, because it's not redeemable for paper currency. Why? Because paper currency is an unlawful medium of exchange. It was created by monopolies, and monopolies need a letter patent from the monarch. That stopped. It's called the Statute of Monopolies, King James. The Statute of Monopolies created by King James. The only thing he created was monopolies. All right, so let's get into this historical background dealing with the ancient mound builders, who are the Anglo-Saxon Berbers. The ancient mound builders of Mississippi are the ancient Anglo-Saxon Berbers, going back to time immemorial. I'm not going to say, I'm going to let those historians who did the research tell you, okay? But first, let's just revisit it and get some insight before we let the professionals do it, all right? Those you call professionals. First, let's get some definitions of some words. Our family crest, right here. See the lions? See the lions. England, Ireland, and Scotland. England, Ireland, and Scotland are not the same. They only came in unification by the Treaty of Union in 1707. They were at war back in the English Civil War, called War of the Three Kingdoms. And Irish and Scottish Presbyterians, Irish and Scottish Presbyterians were at war with England. So in that regard, they enslaved England. I'm going to prove it to you. I am going to prove it to you right now. All right? Your Presbyterian church. Your Presbyterian churches, which are Protestant churches, originated in Pennsylvania, Virginia, which are composed of Quakers from Lancaster. From Lancaster, England. The name Plantagenet was brought to England in the Great Wave of Migration following the Norman Conquest in 1066. The name Plantagenet is for a gardener, as the name one originally derived from the Old English word plant, meaning plant or young tree. The surname Plantagenet was first found in London, city of finance, y'all, city of London, where they held family seat, being descendants from Fulk, the Count of Anjou, whose descendants were exemplified by the Henry V of Germany. Godfrey the Plantagenet from 1113 to 1151. Count of Anjou was the father of Henry II of England, the one who invented the common law. The one who invented the common law. Henry ascended the English throne and thus began the Plantagenet dynasty. He bore the three royal lines, which continued until the time of Edward III, who added the crest of another lion. The eventual heiress of his house was the Princess Elizabeth of York, daughter of Edward IV, and Queen Henry VII. Many junior lines abounded, i.e. the Yorks and the Lancasters. All right, the War of the Roses. So the word Plantagenet is derived from the word plant. So let's just look at the word plant. It has origin in England, France, and Ireland. Let's look at the England, France first. Plant, you see a tree. England, and Ireland. All right, they don't give you too much on that. All right, but just read where it comes from. The ancestors of the plant family brought their name to England in the wave of the migration of the Norman conquest of 1066. The name plant is for a gardener, as the name was originally derived from the English word plant, meaning plant or young tree. The surname Plant was first found in London, where they held their family seat, being descended from Folk, the Count of Anjou. Folk V was the ruler, king of Jerusalem. He left Anjou to his son, Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, and he went on to rule the kingdom of Jerusalem, from which you get the Crusade Wars. And Jerusalem got a history going back to time immemorial, BC era. All right? But this is a record preserved by these historians on the House of Names. All right. So we know that the word Plantagenet is where the word or the term plant derives from. Still going back to the origin of the word folks. Have you heard the word kinfolks? These are your kinfolks. All right. Let's look at planter. England and Ireland. The ancestors of the planters family brought their name to England and the wave of migration after the Norman conquest. The name planter is for a gardener, as the name was originally derived from Old English word plant, meaning plant a young tree. Did I just do that one? Yeah, okay, yeah, no, that was planter. All right, early origin. The surname planter was first found in London, where they held their family seat, being descendants from Folk, the Count of Anjou. The very same language that you read for plant, Plantagenet. You read it for planter. And it said the surname planter was first found in London. All right? So let's look at planter. I didn't write none of this at all. I didn't write this. Planters was an English term for people who were planted abroad in order to promote a political, religious cause for the colonization purposes. The term was very popular in England during the earlier century. So people who came over here under that title or that surname, planter or Plantagenet, only came over here to colonize, to promote political, religious causes for colonizing purposes. Because the word planter also means settler. So we were here as well when my ancestors were over there in Europe. We were here as well. I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you. The settlement was called a plantation. Then they give you an example, as in the plantation of Ulster and the Virginia plantation. Interestingly, the term planter often held different nuances depending on the locale. So there was a plantation in Virginia and a plantation of Ulster, which will be called the plantation of Virginia, which was a company. And they were made up of Irish and Scottish descendants, not English descendants, Irish and Scottish descendants, because the plantation of Ulster is from Irish and Scottish descent. I'm going to prove it to you. Apart from the obvious meaning, the word planter also meant colonist or new settler and was derived from the Middle English word planter in 1350 and 1400 AD. That's the time of Edward III, y'all. That's the kings ruling at that time, Edward III, from the Plantagenet crown. Ancient planters. They ain't ancient because the word ancient goes back to time immemorial, but still they're trying to use the word ancient in the 1600s. The term was typically used for colonists who migrated to the colony of Virginia from 1616 to 1620. These are the Presbyterians, I'm going to prove it to you, who used the term planters. They were called undertakers. We know what an undertaker is, right? A mortician, the one who prepares funerals for the dead. I didn't make that up. Let's just read it for ourselves. The term was typically used for colonists who migrated to the colony of Virginia in 1616 to 1620. The term ancient planter is not an honorific one. You see that? In this timeline, ancient planters were granted large farms upon their arrival in colonies, land that had before belonged to Native Americans. It didn't say Indians. It said Native Americans. You got to use your words wisely. All right? Where's it at? Here we go. So we know that the planters, which are supposed to be from the Plantagenet crown, and they said that the purpose of the Plantagenet crown was to settle or colonize the new world to represent the old world, basically what we just read. But apparently the citizens or the people have been mixed in with somebody else who are not the same people, because they gave an example such as the plantation of Ulster and the Virginia plantation, which was the first colonizers in North America. All right, prior to French and Spanish colonization, which are composed of cadet branches that descended down from the Frankish descendants who were at war with the Plantagenet crown, which that's discussed in previous videos. All right, so they said the settlement was called a plantation, and that's in the plantation of Ulster and the Virginia plantation. So just look that up real quick. Plantation of Ulster. Right here. Undertakers and planters. It says undertakers and planters. During the reign of King James I, sixth king of Scotland, and assumed to be the first king of England. He is not a king of England. He's a king of Scotland, but not a king of England. His descent is Scottish and Irish. During the reign of King James, these massive territories were transferred to some English, but mostly Scottish settlers. These settlers were called undertakers and planters, hence the term plantation of Ulster. Did y'all hear me? The mostly Scottish settlers agreed to remain loyal to the English crown. Listen to the language. The mostly Scottish settlers agreed to remain loyal to the English crown and to retain their religion, which was for the most part Protestant Church of England. So they're supposed to maintain their religion based off the back of the Plantagenet crown, whose religion was English, under the English crown. Not the Scottish crown, not the Irish crown, but the English crown. But yet the Protestants were the Presbyterians who came over here, just like the Quakers, just like all the other denominations who resulted from King Henry VIII's break away from the Roman Catholic Church. This Protestant intrusion into a mostly Catholic country will prove to have troubling impact for the centuries ahead. Did y'all hear that? All right. So they were called the undertakers. Now let's go to the very language and the history concerning the Presbyterian Church in the United States of America. First, let's look at the plantation of Ulster. The plantation of Ulster was an organized colonization of Ulsters, a province of Ireland, by people from Great Britain during the reign of King James I. Most of the settlers came from southern Scotland and northern England. Their culture different from that of native Irish. Let's bring some characters to that real quick. Scottish Irish, Americans at that. Scottish Irish or Scottish Irish American are American descendants of the Ulster Protestants who immigrated from Ulster, Ireland, Northern Province to America during the 18th and 19th century. Did y'all hear that? Through the 18th and 19th century. All right, we ain't gonna go into the history, but I'm gonna show the history right now. So they are Ulsters are Protestants. Now we're gonna look at the Presbyterians. You see it right here. In the South, the Presbyterians were evangelical dissenters, mostly Scottish Irish, who expanded to Virginia between 1740 and 1758. Spengler, 2008, argues that were more energetic and held frequently service better attuned to the frontier conditions of the colony. Presbyterianism grew in frontier areas where the Anglicans had made little impression. Uneducated whites and blacks were attracted to the emotional worship of the denomination. It emphasized on biblical simplicity and psalm singing. All right. Some local Presbyterian churches, such as the Briary in Prince Edward County, owned slaves. Did y'all hear that? Some local Presbyterian churches, such as the Briary in Prince Edward County, Virginia, owned slaves. The brief church purchased 5 slaves in 1766 and raised money for the church expenses by hiring them out to local planters. Did y'all hear that? The chief one was John Witherspoon. John Witherspoon was a Scottish-American Presbyterian minister, educator, farmer, slaveholder, and a founding father of the United States. Witherspoon embraced the concept of Scottish common sense realism, and while president of College of New Jersey, now Princeton University, became an influential figure in the development of the United States national character. Politically active, Witherspoon was a delegate from New Jersey to the Second Continental Congress and a signatory to the July 4, 1776 Declaration of Independence. He was the only active clergyman and the only college president to sign the declaration, the only minister. Later, he signed the Articles of Confederation and supported the ratification of the Constitution of the United States. A slaveholder, y'all. Y'all better understand what I'm saying. Okay. So we know that Plantagenet, all descended down from the Plantagenet house. And this is the Plantagenet house. The house of Plantagenet. As you can see, the 3 lions. The Plantagenet or Plantagenet dynasty was a royal house which originated from the lands of Anjou and Normandy in France. The family held the English throne from 1154 with the ascension of Henry II at the end of the anarchy to 1485 when Richard III died in battle. Under the Plantagenets, England transformed. The Plantagenet kings were often forced to negotiate compromises such as the Magna Carta, which has served to constrain their royal power in return for financial and military support. It says here, a distinct national identity was shaped by their conflict with the French, Scottish, Welsh, and Irish, and as well as by the establishment of the Middle English as a primary language. In the 15th century, the Plantagenets were defeated in the 100-Year War and beset with social, political, and economic problems. Popular revolts were commonplace, triggered by the denial of numerous freedoms. English nobles raised private armies, engaged in private feuds, and openly defied Henry VI. All right. The robbery between the House of Plantagenets, two cadet branches of the York and Lancasters, brought about the War of the Roses, a decade-long fight for the English succession culminated in the Battle of Bosworthville in 1485. When the reign of the Plantagenets in the English Middle Ages both met their end with the death of King Richard III, Henry VII, everybody hear that? Of a legitimized Lancastrian descent, became King of England. 5 months later, he married Elizabeth of York, thus giving rise to the Tudor dynasty. The Tudors worked to centralize English world power, which allowed them to avoid some of the problems that had plagued the last Plantagenet rulers. The resulting stability allowed the English Renaissance and the event early modern Britain. All right, let me go down a little further. Angevin crown. Angevin kings of England. Angevin is French for Anjou. The three Angevin kings were the 12th century Godfrey of Anjou's son, Henry II, grandson Richard I, and John. Noble houses were regular denominations by a territory or place of birth, i.e. House of Normandy and House of Wessex. They were all connected to Margaret of Scotland, who married Henry I, who was the son, Henry I was the son of William the Conqueror, and William the Conqueror invaded Normandy. He fell under the same laws under the houses of Normandy as was followed by the House of Wessex under Alfred the Great and his descendants, all the way up to Edward the Confessor. All right. It says Angevin can also refer to the period of history in which they reigned. Many historians identify the Angevin as a distinct English royal house. Angevin is also used in reference to any sovereign and government derived from Anjou. As known, it refers to any native of Anjou or Angevin ruler, and specifically to the counts or the dukes of Anjou, including the ancestors of the three kings who formed the English royal houses, their cousins who held the crowns of Jerusalem, and two unrelated members of the French royal family who were later granted the titles and formed different dynasties, such as the Capetin House of Anjou and Valios House of Anjou. These are the ones who ruled Louisiana through the Kingdom of France under Francis I to Louis XVI. Consequently, there is a disagreement between those who consider John's son Henry III to be the first Plantagenet monarch and those who do not distinguish between the Angevin and Plantagenets and therefore consider the first Plantagenet to be Henry II. Either way, they family. Okay? Either way, we family. Y'all need to understand what's going on. All right? So we show you that the Presbyterian Church, which is also a Protestant church, were heavy in slavery, because it goes back to the plantation of Ulster, which had a plantation in England and a plantation here in Virginia, as established by King James through the English Civil War, and then to carry on to Charles I, who was executed, and then they had a brief interregnum until Charles II came to the restoration in 1660. All right. Then he started giving out charters to the proprietors on the East Jersey and West Jersey, i.e. Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and all those upper states, and the lower states were under control of the proprietors George Carteret and John Berkeley, right, which was surrendered back to the crown in 1702 to the English crown, not the Scottish crown, and not the Irish crown, or not the German crown under King George I. All right. Let's get to it. So as you can see, the Presbyterian Church was heavy in slavery. Presbyterianism. Yes. Presbyterian. Presbyterianism is a part of the Reformed tradition with Protestantism that broke from the Roman Catholic Church. Presbyterian churches derive their name from the Presbyterian form of church government by representative assemblies of elders. Many Reformed churches are organized this way, but the word Presbyterian, when capitalized, is often applied to churches that trace their roots to the Church of Scotland or to English descendant groups that are formed during the English Civil War, i.e., the War of the Three Kingdoms. The Presbyterians' theology typically emphasized the sovereignty of God, the authority of the scriptures, and the necessity of grace through faith in Christ. Presbyterian church government was ensured in Scotland by the Acts of Union in 1707. So it was formulated in the English Civil War and then validated in the Acts of Union when they became the Great Britain. It said, which created the Kingdom of Great Britain. In fact, most Presbyterians found in England can trace a Scottish connection, and the Presbyterian denomination was also taken to North America, mostly by Scots and Scottish Irish immigrants. All right, take you back here. Scottish Irish Americans, also some plantations, and they enslaved as undertakers the Plantagenet descendants. All right. Go here. Schoolcraft. We talked about this guy, Henry Rose Schoolcraft. First of all, the name Schoolcraft. You know they got the Jerusalem cross right here, all right? The Schoolcraft History Family Press and coats of arms. The name Schoolcraft belonged to the early history of Britain. Its origins lie with the Anglo-Saxons. It is a product of their having lived in a village of Scholes and the parish of Barwick in West Riding of Yorkshire. Yorkshire is synonymous with the House of York, Yorkshire. You got the House of York. It's about the House of Yorks. At the time of the taking of Doomsday in 1086, Shows was the site of the 3 churches and 3 mills. The surname Schoolcraft was first found in Yorkshire. Yorkshire is symbolic of the House of York. All right. So now this takes us there. Henry Schoolcraft. Henry Rowe Schoolcraft. So we should assume that the name he has is a name that's descended from Yorkshire, England, which is originated from the House of York. But he's an American. His nationality is American. You can't throw your nationality off, brothers and sisters. That you cannot do. His occupation was geographer, geologist, and the ethnologist. Everybody see? Henry Rowe Schoolcraft was an American geographer, geologist, and ethnologist, noted for his early studies of Native Americans, not Native American Indians, Native Americans, because he himself was an Indian, as well as from his 1832 expedition to the sources of the Mississippi River. He is also noted for his 6-volume study of Native Americans commissioned by Congress and published in 1850. He served as a United States Indian agent in Michigan for a period beginning in 1822. During this period, his name severally newly organized counties often created neologisms that he claimed were derived from indigenous languages. Then he married Jane Johnson, daughter of a prominent Scottish Irish fur trader, and the pronounce that right, Ojibwe, forgive me if I pronounce it wrong, mother, who was a high-ranking daughter of a Wabuji, a war chief. Johnson lived with her family in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. All right, so this was one of Henry Rowe's Schoolcraft's wife, Jane Jane Johnson. So let's look at Jane Johnson real quick. Jane Johnson, also known as, you can read it for yourself, I can't pronounce that, is one of the earliest Native American literary writers. She was a Ojibwe and Scottish Irish ancestry. Her Ojibwe name can also be written as, I'm gonna try it, Obabamawiwi Gizi Goigri. Pardon self, y'all, I tried. And modest spelling meaning woman of the sound that the stars make. rushing through the sky, from bomb place to place, or beamy alone. We make or repeated sound, Gizig sky and equally woman. She lived her life in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. All right. So this was the wife of Henry Rose Schoolcraft. And they all claim to be descendants of Indians. All right. So there we can see it. Now let's really get down, because we know that the House of York, where the name Schoolcraft came from, was a cadet branch from the House of Plantagenet. This man, Henry Rose Schoolcraft, got the nerve to name a lake in Minnesota, and Minnesota was colonized by Frankish monarchs under the kingdom of Frankish, under the House of Velios, under Francis I. All right, so he claimed and named this lake Lake Plantagenet. Lake Plantagenet is a lake of the United States of Minnesota. The name of the lake commemorates the House of Plantagenet, not the House of York, not the House of Lancaster, because they were enslaving the descendants of the Yorks and the Lancasters as a result of the War of the Roses. So Henry VIII put all their assets in a trust. In the trust. The name of the lake commemorates the House of Plantagenet, named after Ozan Windsor and Ojibwe, who guided Henry Schoolcraft to the nearby Elk Lake, renamed by Schoolcraft as Lake Issachar. So this American goes and makes the name of a river the name of the Lake Plantagenet, when this lake had always been called Lake Plantagenet, because the Plantagenet descendants live in the area of what we call Minnesota. And Minnesota, Mississippi, Louisiana, Ohio, all these territories were territories of what we call the mound-builders, where my name Jefferson comes from. And Jefferson is Godfrey, which is the name of the ruler of the House of Plantagenet, Godfrey, the 5th Count of Anjou. Everybody got to understand this. Let's get to it. Anglo-Saxon Berbers. We're dealing with the custom and usage of custom usage or traditions of how us as Anglo-Saxons buried our ancestors. All right. This practice was in Anglo-Saxon times. This practice was in the time of the Mississippi mound-builders, who were the ones who built megalithic structures. We're the ones who built the megalithic structures. All right, I'm gonna prove it to you. On Wikipedia, the traditional Berber religion is an ancient and native set of beliefs and deities adhered to by the Berbers. Many ancient Berbers believed were developed locally, whereas others were influenced over time through contact with other like ancient Egyptian religion, or borrowed during antiquity from Punic religions, Judaism, Iberian mythology, and Hellenistic religion. Pay very close attention to what that this paragraph just said, because I'm going to show you experts on the topic who did the research and made the same statement about these fraudulent exhibits that they claim to be ancient. It said many ancient Berber beliefs were developed locally, and whereas others were influenced. Influence means you got yours from the Berbers over time through contact with others like ancient Egyptians, religions, or borrowed during antiquity from Punic religions, Judaism, Iberian mythology, and Hellenistic religion. Some of the ancient Berber beliefs still exist today subtly within the Berber popular cultures and traditions. Syncretic influences from traditional Berber religions can also be found in certain other faiths. All right, so let's go back to, we know we're dealing with filigree practices, but let's go back to, see if we can find it, megalithic, right here. Megalithic culture. Augustine and Hippo mentioned Excuse me. Stop like that. Megalithic culture in regards to the Berber religion. Augustine of Hippo mentioned that the polytheistic Africans worshiped the rock. You hear that? Augustus of Hippo mentioned that the polytheistic, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Africans worshiped the rock. Augustine of Hippo was dead and gone, if he ever existed at all. All right. Apuleius stated as well that rocks were worshipped in the 2nd century. The Megalithic culture may have been part of a cult of the dead or of star worship. All right. The monument of Mysora is best known megalithic monument in Northwest Africa. It is composed of a circle of megaliths and surrounding a tumulus. The highest megalith is over 5 meters, according to legend. It is a sepulchre of the Greco-Roman giant Antiochus, if I pronounce that right. Another megalithic monument was discovered in 1926 to the south of Casablanca. The monuments were engraved with funerary inscriptions in Berber script known as the Tifna. All right, Tifna is the language that you see. It's the same language you see on the movie Black Panther. It's the same letters you see in the Black Panther. All right, they give you English equivalent to that of Tifna. And they worship rocks in Black Panther. All right, they use the flower to get the essence to go back into the ancestral plane, but they use that rock. You know what I'm saying? They say they just found this rock in Africa that generates electricity. They say they found this rock in Africa. All right. So it's the monument of Mysora is the best known megalithic monument in Northwest Africa. It is composed of a circle of megaliths surrounded by a tumulus. So what is a tumulus? A tumulus, plural tumuli, is a mound or earth stones raised over a grave or graves. Tumuli are also known as barrows or burial mounds. They're also called effigies or kurgans, and may be found through much of the world. A cairn, which is a mound of stone built for various purposes, may also originally have been a tumulus. So we see that tumulus is a burial mound for the dead. All right, a sanctuary, or what they call a sepulchre. All right, that's found all over the world. Here we talking about Africa. They also found that in France, called the Karnak stones. All right, they also found in Egypt, Stonehenge, and they're also found in here in what we call North America under the authorship of what we call the Mississippi mound-builders. And when I say Mississippi mound-builders, we talk about Native Americans, and we say Native Americans, we're not talking about Native Indians. All right. These are also Anglo-Saxons. All right, let's check that out. Anglo-Saxon burial mounds. An Anglo-Saxon burial mound is an accumulation of earth stones erected over a grave or crypt during the late 17th century AD in Anglo-Saxon England. These burial mounds are also known as burials or tumuli. The same thing. The same thing. We transfer them, we convey them where we went. We take the same cultural tradition with us. All right. We are all brothers and sisters. All right. So what do I mean by saying this? Now let's get a historical validation that we are all the same people. The prehistoric inhabitants of the Mississippi Valley. Part 1, The Mound Builders, by D.A. Robertson of St. Paul, Minnesota, fellow of the American Geographical Society. society. Minnesota. Lake Plantagenet is in Minnesota. Minnesota was inhabited by many indigenous Native American tribes, not Indians. These were all composed of what we call the mound builders. Let's read it. Communicate it. Let me blow this up so you definitely can see this. Get this article, y'all. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna let y'all type that in so y'all can see it. Sorry about that. Historic inhabitants of the Mississippi Valley. Part 1, the mound builders. Listen very, 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 very closely. People who call themselves Negro, Black, Colored, Indians, or Moorish American, any of those, because we know that under the Articles of Confederation and the Treaty of Alliance, as well as the proclamation by King George of 1763 and the Treaty of Paris of 1763 in regard to the territory that was surrendered back to England, and England was under the jurisdiction of what we call Great Britain, which is a result of the Irish and Scottish influence on England, all right, known as the Presbyterian Church, because they were Irish, Scottish Protestant. They were English dissenters. They were English dissenters, all right? And we just qualified that Schoolcraft, who studied geology, gemology, or whatever the term was, what was this, what was it he studied? Geologist, that means the study of the earth, right? Geography, study of the earth. Geologists, study of the minerals of the earth, and ethnologists dealing with the ethnicity of those people who got the right to the land, i.e. geologists, as well as to study the earth. We were the ones who did that. If you colonize, you must know where the hell you're going, than just bumping into someplace. So when we brought these traditions, customs, based off history in regards to indigenous customs, we took it with us, and we knew where we were going. All right, before those who colonized it didn't know where they were going and started to try to understand the culture which they're using to this present day. All right, so he was geography, geologist, and ethnologist. All right, let's go to this article. Studies, investigations, and explorations prosecuted for more than 25 years have resulted in the opinion that long before the post-Columbian colonization of America, post-Columbian, so before the right of discovery or conquest of discovery, there was already civilizations here in North America called the Mississippi Valley. Studies, investigation, exploration prosecuted for more than 25 years have resulted in the opinion that long before the post-Columbian colonization of America, the Mississippi Valley was inhabited by two distinct and irrevocable peoples. One of a self-civilized, the other of self-barbarian race, and that the first, a migration from northwestern Europe, arrived upon the northeastern coast of America above the latitude of 49 degrees, and that the second migration from North America, northeastern Asia, arrived upon the northwestern coast of America north of that same latitude, and that those two streams of migrations met in the Mississippi Valley. And they encountered their encounter each other in irreconcilable conflict, each fighting for territorial mastery, and that this conflict of adverse races was prosecuted for centuries and finally resulted several hundred years before the post-Columbian immigration in an explosion and final destruction of the prehistoric self-civilizing people, leaving the self-barbarizing race in possession of the entire country. Two groups, one self-civilizing and one barbarian, one barbarizing, meaning they were barbarians. The Berbers were not barbarians. They were a civilized nation. They were the mound builders. They were not a warring people, all right? There have been found throughout the Mississippi Valley 2 classes of earthworks which contain evidence of diverse origin, one of which is evidently a recent formation, okay? Recent formation. The other class of structures of much greater magnitude found in the same localities bear evidence of greater antiquity. The former embraces the graves and burial mounds of existing Indian races, many of which mounds contain numerous human skeletons in tolerable state of preservation. Preservation. The height of these mounds rarely exceed 4 or 5 feet in 4 to 5 feet, and as a general rule, the number of bodies they originally contained was in proportion to their respective dimensions. American archaeologists, American archaeologists, I don't know, I'm having a hard time pronouncing that word, archaeologists and the Indians themselves attribute these low and irregular graves or burial mounds to tribes of Indians, the remnants of which now inhabit the western frontier of the country. To the same race are to be assigned also the ruins of earth-covered houses on the Missouri and the rude entrenchments which rarely attain a height greater than from 2.5 to 5 or 6 feet and are found above the site of old Indian villages, as compared with the numerous and gigantic earthwork of the Mississippi Valley, which are attributed by most archaeologists to another and extinct race named the mound builders. These Indian remains are too insignificant in all respect, too rude and dissimilar to be classed with those of the mound builders. Did y'all hear that? The Indians' remains are too insignificant to be in the same classification as archaeologists have found to be in the same classification as mound builders. The remains of those whose works are numerous in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, from which these articles come from, Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, Texas, and Western Dakota, i.e. Dakota people, and on the river, Rainy River, and on Mouse River, north of the boundary line of Manitoba. And these regions are the most fertile and the best adapted to the wants of settled industrious populations on this continent. The 2 classes of earthwork referred to are often confounded by local and superficial observers. The great mounds and other earthworks of the upper Mississippi Valley closely resemble those of the prehistoric Europe. Did you hear that? Did y'all hear that? The great mounds and other earthworks of upper Mississippi Valley closely resemble those of prehistoric Europe. We talk about those tumuli or tumulus, those earth mounds or barrels, effigies. That's what we talk about. They're also found in Europe. They're also found in Africa. They're also found here in North America. Why? Because we built them. Once again, the great mounds and other earthworks of the upper Mississippi Valley closely resemble those of the prehistoric Europe. And they are more ancient than those in the lower Mississippi Valley, which more resemble the tectili of Mexico. The latter indicate an advance on the Mississippi Valley mound building civilization and show ethnic unity of development proceeding from north-southward. Almost all the large sepulchre mounds of the Mississippi Valley that have been examined contain evidence that each one has been the tomb of a single person, meaning they ain't all piled up together, of one single person, perhaps a great chief priest or warrior, and that the earth heaped over his remains were evidently brought from a distance. This is an important archaeological fact suggesting Asiatic and European descent. Did you hear that? Archaeological fact that is suggesting Asiatic or European descent. A sepulchral tumulus of the mound builders, 20 feet high by 30 feet base, was opened near Chickalete, Ohio, which Squire and Davis, Ancient Monuments of Mississippi Valley, page 162, described as a typical, and they add, it is clear that the tumulus were raised over a single skeleton. The mound builders of the Mississippi Valley, as of ancient Europe and Asia, usually deposited a single body or later a urn containing its ashes upon the original surface of the ground or on a cyst, erecting the monument's mounds over it. The size of the mound was in proportion to the dignity and importance of the honored dead. Did y'all hear that? So this culture not only took place in here in what we call North America and Mississippi mound builders, but in Anglo-Saxon and in Africa, all the way back to what we call the ancient Egyptians, which were actually Berbers. They were Berbers because it goes back to the megalithic structures of the religion of the Berbers, as we just proved. So in closing, back to the Schoolcraft guy, who was a Native American Indian. Let's start here. And who can believe that our Indians had constructed the earth embankments in Ohio at Newark and Portsmouth, the latter from 14 to 60 miles in extent, or the graded road of Pequot, or the chain of mound signal stations in Ohio, for instance, telegraphing to great distances, or to the fortification of the tumuli in rich valley of that state, or the great works near Newark, Circleville, and Chickalacothe. I'm gonna tell what we do, y'all. Which seem to have been great centers of mound building populations, ? Or the great works throughout the southern Mississippi Valley states, which show progressive change in structure and indicate an advance in civilization. Many of the southern tumuli are formed like that of Tecalica of Mexico, commonly attributed to the Toltecs. The mound builders says Jas D. Baldwin had a certain degree of civilization which raised them far above the conditions of savages. To make such work possible under any circumstances, there must be settled life, which is the accumulation and intelligently organized industry. That's from Ancient America by Jas D. Baldwin. That the mound builders were not of our Indian races is evidenced not only by the number and magnitude of their gigantic remains, but also by their geometrical structures, which show very considerable engineering experience and mathematical skill. Their works exhibit regular outlines, squares, octagons, circles, ellipses, executed with precision. Did y'all hear that? Many of their squares are exactly 1,080 feet on each side, showing that they had some exact standard of measurement. No such knowledge or skill as this had been found among any tribe of American Indians. That our Indians are descendants of the mound builders has been a favorite theory of Schoolcraft. When they talk about Henry wrote Schoolcraft, so that's what they're talking about. They said that our Indians are descendants of the mound builders has been a favorite theory of Schoolcraft and some other authors who were themselves connected by marriage with Indian tribes, as I stated earlier, but they have failed to adduce either fact or argument to recommend this hypothesis. Various other theories have been advanced to account for the origin of ethnological relations of the mound builders and will be briefly considered. The pretended relics and the inscriptions which have been supposed to identify them with the Jews, Phoenicians, and later Scandinavians, like the reports, plates inscribed with Hebrew characters, the letter stone of Great Greek Mound, and all other reports of letters inscribed relics said to have been found in the ancient mounds of earthwork of the Mississippi Valley, proved to have been fables or fraud. No evidence of ancient letters of any kind has been found in any of the ancient monuments of the Mississippi Valley. So there you have it. The ancient mound builders are the same people as the Anglo-Saxon burghers who were found throughout this whole world. There's your proof. So honor your ancient forefathers as we have done thus far, so that your days will be honored upon this earth. And with that, I say peace.